Summer, 1969. Somewhere in England, in a small house, a television was on. Just like in the rest of the street, the whole family had come to watch. Incredibly, there was a man going to space, and the world had stopped to see him off. The grainy picture showed NASA mission control, excited crowds at Cape Canaveral, and there he was, in his silver suit, a man who had agreed to go further away than any person had ever been. Everyone in that room was amazed, but not everyone in the same way. She watched him differently from how the others watched. It wasn't excitement, it was something more like affinity. The rocket stood on its pad and waited. The countdown started, the engines on. She leaned forward, transfixed. At liftoff, her father gasped. Her mother reached for her arm. Her brother shook his head. She didn't move or make a sound. Long after everyone else had gone to bed, she was still there. The rest of the family had moved on. She hadn't. She was still watching the rolling news coverage as the rocket burned into the darkness. His capsule was barely larger than a tin can in the scale of space. It was nothing at all, far above the world. The force of it pressed him into his seat until it stopped pressing, and then nothing. The weight of everything, simply gone. He took off his helmet. Things he'd put down floated up to meet him. A pencil, a folded page of mission notes. The world had become a different kind of place. From up there, planet Earth was blue, and there was nothing he could do. Ground control kept calling. Everything was functioning. Everything was correct. From their side, the mission was proceeding exactly as planned. He had known, from some point before the launch, possibly from some point before he had agreed to go at all, that he was going to do this. He extended a gloved hand and switched off the radio. Ground control kept calling. Major Tom had stopped answering. His circuit was dead, and there was something wrong. Outside the porthole, space went on, massive and indifferent. It didn't require anything from anyone, and he floated in the silence he had chosen. The next night, the news changed. Ground control kept calling. Nobody answered. The mission, the reporters said, appeared to have been abandoned. She watched the concerned faces on the screen and thought, they don't know him. They don't understand what he was doing up there. They think it was an accident. Slowly, everyone else moved on. The news had other stories. Life had other noise. She didn't move on. Long after the television had given up its picture for the night, she was still in front of it. The static was the loudest kind of silence. She sat in it anyway. Home was difficult. She had always been withdrawn, distant, and since the mission, these silences grew. Her parents' frustration just made her withdraw more to her room. The cinema was easier. Nobody at the cinema needed anything from her. She could sit in the dark and escape for 2 hours. They were showing a comedy. The audience found it funnier than she did. She'd seen it 10 times or more. Everyone had. She didn't leave, though. The dark was useful, even if the film wasn't. Bored, she stopped watching the film. The silver screen became a blur as her mind drifted away. She had much bigger questions to ponder. Sat in the cinema, she imagined Mars. Not the scientific Mars. Her Mars. A place of impossible colors and formations, vast and silent and completely alive. In her mind, he had found it and was safe. He walked the surface of her Mars in his silver suit, exploring, alive. She'd given him somewhere magnificent to be. A vast alien surface, deep rust red, crystalline mineral formations reaching upward in impossible geometry, strange and magnificent. Then the cinema came back. The comedy played on. She got up and left while it was still running. She needed to know if her version was true. That night, when the house went quiet, she crept downstairs to find out if it was. She turned the tuning dial on the TV, the screen fizzing through static and snow. She kept turning, and then, on Channel 2, the signal zigzagged and cleared. He wasn't on Mars. He wasn't anywhere. He was still in the tin can, still floating, still surrounded by blinking instruments nobody was reading anymore. He had been up there for 2 months. Her imagined happy ending rewritten on the screen. She put her hand on the screen. He couldn't see her, but something in the signal, she was certain, told her he knew she was watching. She came downstairs every night after the house went quiet and picked up Channel 2, its electric light the only one in the house. What it showed her was unlike anything on any other channel. No longer the flickering picture from his capsule, but now psychedelic, mind-bending transmissions. It was almost too much to look at. It would settle into something almost coherent and then fly apart again in colorful eruptions, all on a supposedly black and white TV. She watched it all. She didn't miss a night. The family slept on upstairs, unaware of the universe coming through on Channel 2. She'd creep back upstairs after Channel 2 faded out and go straight to the window. Something was waiting up there. She'd felt it before she could hear it. She saw it one night. A single point of light moving slowly and steadily across the night sky. Too deliberate to be a star. Too slow and wrong for an aircraft. And then she understood. The capsule and the transmission were the same thing. He was up there in his tin can and he was sending. Not to everyone. To her. She was his ground control. He was her Starman. She didn't tell anyone. There was no version of that conversation that would end well. She kept it to herself. Absolutely, completely, without witnesses. Years passed and the secret nightly missions persisted. She got older, but remained quiet and semi-detached by day. Her nights stayed the same. She'd wait for the street to go quiet, the last light and the last window. Then she'd go downstairs. In her bedroom, she was building something, slowly, piece by piece. Folded paper, cardboard, foil over wire. It grew in the corner of her room like something trying to leave. Her mother worried about her. She was always awake at night, always tired at breakfast. She was always somewhere else or crafting in her room, on her own planet. One night, Channel 2 showed nothing but static. She adjusted the dial. It stayed static. The transmission had stopped. Nights passed, the static stayed. The shrieking of nothing was killing her, inside. She left the set on and sat with the fizzing signal and waited. Nothing. The house was asleep above her. Then she'd creep back upstairs and add another piece to the creation growing in her room. If he wasn't sending, then she would be building. 3 weeks of nothing, and then the static changed. Not the old signal, something different and strangely real. The picture resolved, and he wasn't floating in his capsule far above the world. There was another world around him. Not any world she could name. It was as if his spaceship knew which way to go. The capsule was there, behind him, in the background. Crashed, half buried, growing over with something alien and luminous. He had landed. He He had survived something she hadn't witnessed. He was still somewhere. He had been out there so long that space had got into him, into his eyes, into the way he moved, into the particular way he looked through the screen. There was no coming back from that. But he was still sending. He wasn't alone on the planet. There were others, beings she had no word for, that she wasn't sure her language had the capacity to describe. He had been out there long enough that the planet's strangeness had become his ordinary. He moved through it with the ease of someone who has stopped expecting anything to make sense and found that freeing. Things grew from the wreckage of his arrival. Something like life had decided the ashes were a good place to start. He was still transmitting, still reaching back toward whoever might be listening. Still there, still him, a starman waiting in the sky. And it blew her mind. She hadn't heard the floorboard. She was entirely enwrapped. Her mother stood in the doorway, looking at the television, at the floor, at her daughter crouched in front of Channel 2 in the middle of the night. She snapped, exasperated. "If you're ever going to get things done," she nagged, "you'd better stop messing with all this Major Tom business." The girl said nothing. She turned off the television and went upstairs. She stood in her bedroom and looked at the rocket in the corner. She pinned the last piece. "My mama said to get things done." She said it quietly at first, then again, then louder, not shouting it, building it. "My mama said to get things done." The words that had always been meant to keep her small. She used them differently now. She opened the window. The night came in. She launched the rocket into the night sky, and she stood at the window and watched it go. That was the only thing left to do. A month later, way out at Major Tom's planet, something changed in the sky above. He looked up. A light approaching through the alien atmosphere, descending slowly. A small paper object, obscuring the starlight as it fell. Something that had traveled an impossible distance to arrive here. The alien sky beautiful and strange around it. It descended through the thin atmosphere, as if it knew the way to him. A small paper thing, handmade, from somewhere he had almost stopped believing still existed. He opened it as carefully as he'd opened anything. 3 words, that was all it needed to be. "I hear you." Something settled in him that had been unsettled for 11 years. He looked up at the dark sky and held his gaze there. The distance between them felt less, but it had never been about the distance. She stood at her window, an empty space in the corner of her room where the rocket had stood. The stars were where they had always been. She looked up at them the way she had since she was 10 years old, no longer sitting too close to a black and white TV set hoping for a sign. Now she knew where he was, not on a screen, not in a signal, up there somewhere. And in his own extraordinary way, he heard her too.